welcome to Turtle Tracks Podcast. This is your host, Brian VanHooker, and I'm here with Neave Lifschits, lead animator on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Really awesome to be here.
So, just to clarify, we talked a little bit beforehand. So you are lead animator on the movie for Cinesite Studios, right?
Yeah.
So, you said about 25 minutes of the movie was done by Cinesite. Well, who's the main studio? Forgive me.
Mikros.
Okay.
Mikros, I forgot their full name, but Mikros, they have a studio in Montreal and in France. I believe a lot of it was done in Montreal.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like,
did you still like report to like Jeff Rowe or whatever? Or?
Yeah. We worked with Jeff Rowe and Kyler Spears directly, and directors every day. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah.
I guess before we get into the movie though, like, were you like a turtle fan growing up? Like, what was your familiarity with the Ninja Turtles before this movie?
Yeah, I would say I was generally a fan. When I originally moved to Canada to work at my first like in-house studio job, I saw that the studio was working on the Turtles TV show, the 2012 one, the CG one.
Okay.
And I really wanted to work on that, but they had just finished when I joined. So that was probably like my first kind of like, oh, I almost got it. And I've seen some of that TV show. I actually really liked the 2D Turtles show as well, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I saw some of that. So I was definitely
like that. The animation on that show is fantastic.
It's amazing. Yeah, like the choreography fight, like it's insane. So I feel like that was probably like the big entrance for me into that. As a kid, I feel like I knew about them and I liked them, but I don't remember like watching it a ton. So that was probably like, a bit of a older fan for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then, kind of like everyone else, I saw the logo online whenever you released it for Mutant Mayhem, and I was like, oh, that looks really, really cool. And I just heard some rumors about it, because the industry is small and people talk. So I was like, oh, it sounds really cool. Yeah, I didn't know really anything about it, to be honest, besides the fact that it's a new CG kind of film. So I was like really excited to hear about like something being done in that world. Yeah.
The how far along was the movie when it came to your studio?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I didn't join exactly when they got it. I think I joined maybe like a couple months after, so it's a bit hard to say, but wow, I don't know. Like I know that like with the sequences that we worked on, there was quite a significant amount left to do, but it's hard for me to say like how much of it. And also like each department is in a different phase, right? So it might be that animation is finished a certain portion, but lighting isn't done or stuff like that. For us, like even though I joined like not in the beginning, like there was still rig testing to do and like technical things. So I would say, there was a significant amount of work, still left to do. And obviously Mikros was also still working on the movie, but I didn't have like a lot of clarity of what they were working on. But when we joined, when I joined Cinesite, like they had a lot of footage from Mikros that they shared with us that we were able to see. But most of it, from what I recall, wasn't like fully lit and rendered and all that stuff. But yeah, I would say there was a significant amount of animation.
Was there any so this movie looked amazing. Like it really the concept art kind of look of it. It gave it like I think it follows in the footsteps a bit of Spider-Verse, but its own way very much carves out its own place because Spider-Verse is so crisp and polished, whereas this kind of purposefully it's like it's such a like it embraced a totally different aesthetic. I'm curious if there were a unique challenge because you've worked on a ton of movies. Was there any unique challenges of working in that style of this sort of sketchy, rougher thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on the animation point, first of all, like the animation had a different frame rate, which Spider-Verse does as well.
What is it? Like, how does that, and like, what was it? And like, can you explain like why it's different? Like why?
Yeah, so generally when you're watching an animated film, there will be 24 drawings per second, right? So we call it 24 frames per second. Disney originally was the one who found out that there's this thing called persistence of vision. That's what I've learned, at least as a student. So they found out that, we can actually do 12 drawings per second. So each drawing is held for 2 frames, and the eye won't notice it. Like it'll still look good if it's well animated. And so you can cut costs, 50% less work, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of where it started, which is what I love about like, when you originally find out where these animation styles came from, a lot of them are economical reasons, right? Even like
Sure.
smear frames and all of these multiples and paint effects lines were like to hide things because economically was too much to draw and create every single in between or drawing. And so that's how it originally started. And so in CG, I think the first very popular CG movie that I knew about it that did it is Peanuts, the Peanuts movie by Blue Sky. So they did it
Oh
quite
yeah, there is
quite
something.
drastically.
It
Yeah,
moves. I don't know, like I don't have
yeah,
vocabulary, but it moves differently.
exactly. Yeah, it's got this like staccato and very sharp, feeling to it. A lot of people say the word crisp versus smooth, for example. But Spider-Verse, and then like I worked on a TV show called The Dragon Prince that had that as well, and
My
they tried to
daughter,
do.
I've never watched that show, to be honest. My daughter
No worries.
loved that show.
Oh, okay,
Like
yeah,
she watches
it's a
it
really
constantly.
great show.
And like I'm not gonna. I'm sure I'll watch with it sometime. I just haven't.
Yeah, no
She's talking to me
worries.
like about that show so much.
The story is just fantastic. I
She's 9. She's in
remember,
love with that show.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Dragon Prince tried to take a lot of inspiration from anime, for example, with frame rate changes where sometimes in anime things will be on 5s or on 8s or on 6s, like going
Does
it a
that
little
mean
bit
5
further.
frames per second, 8 frames per second? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
So
So
frame
it's
per
like
even
there's
less.
5 drawings instead of, 24 per second or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really wild. Um and so, or sorry, not 5, but like I guess it's hard to do the math. Um Instead of like every frame there's a drawing, it's every 5 frames is a drawing. So I guess if it's 24 frames, it's like kind of like
Okay.
5 frames per second, maybe. Yeah. So that was probably, that's a challenge in a way with CG for sure. In the sense that you see the poses a lot more. You see the animation for longer, kind of, right? So
Sure.
I feel like there's generally a bigger focus on that. So that was, part of the challenge. And then a lot of the stuff that you see in the film that looks like effect, a lot of it was actually done by animation. So for example, there's like these speed lines that were kind of added on top. So a lot of that, at least from Cinesite point of view, like we did some of that, which was really cool. I know Mikros did as well, but as I said, I have less knowledge of how much they did it and where. So that has its challenges as well. And then just the character designs, like the character designs, especially with the more secondary characters, like the non-turtles, I feel they're very, very asymmetrical, especially the mutants, for example, like
You say like
Superfly.
the bad guy mutants, I'm sure.
Yeah, the bad guy mutants, or even like the henchmen, like the human henchmen, like their noses are like here and their mouth is crooked and one eye is bigger. And it's just like by default, like that's how when you open up your scene, like that's what they look like, right? So that has its challenges of like, animating things that are asymmetrical is always more challenging, especially because you can't copy one thing to another. And the weight is affected differently. Like if you have a mutant that has like a huge arm on one side and a smaller arm on another, like Superfly has his like huge claw. So, that was a challenge.
Oh right,
And then
you
yeah.
don't think about the weight, but like the way Superfly stands is very much like
Hmm.
askew or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And then I think there was just a lot of pressure to pay homage to all the voice actors, all the history, all that stuff. Like the Jackie Chan stuff specifically was like a big focus, of
Sure.
course. So things like that.
So what is the
But
frame
yeah,
rate of Turtles? Like what is the frame rate on that movie?
it changes. It's not always on twos. I wouldn't say it's always on twos. And also like classical animation, like even like Disney and even older stuff, like I don't think they had everything on twos. You can still decide to have a one every once in a while. So
What's the
it's not
effect? Like,
always.
what's your what's the visually, what is the effect on the viewer who doesn't know what they're seeing?
Normally, for faster actions, you will have it on ones because if a character is punching and you've only got 2 drawings, you'll only have this and then this. So sometimes it's nice to have an extra frame in between so people can like properly track faster action. Otherwise, they might miss it, for example. So that is like one example. Like I think ones are really helpful for like impacts and anything that's fast because you just might miss it, you know. So different things like that. But I would say generally speaking, whenever we could, we kept it on twos, more or less. Like that's what I recall anyway. And then camera moves is where things get really tricky because the camera moves on ones, not on twos. You can't have a camera on twos. I think people will get seasick. Like, so what do? Like, because technically when you move the camera, the image moves, so it looks like your character's moving, whether you like it or not, right? Like it's a two-dimensional image, no matter what program you're making this in.
So the camera moves in a three-dimensional space, right?
Yeah, but the viewer sees a two-dimensional image. There is no three-dimensional space. It's like a weird thing to think about, right? Because people call it like CG, 2D, stop motion. Yeah. You can animate with sand. You can animate with anything, right? But
why can't you do cameras on twos? Like, why would that make you sick? Like, what would be wrong with that? I'm so curious.
I feel like I would have to show you. Yeah, I feel like I would have to show you. Yeah, it's hard to. Well, the thing that happens, I think it's easier to explain with like if your camera and your character are not on the same frame rate, is that it'll stutter. So the camera will move, but the character will kind of do like this. Because this is moving consistently and this is only moving every 2 frames, so you'll kind of have this.
Okay.
I don't know if I can find an example to show you.
This is so interesting.
Yeah, no worries. So normally, so what Spider-Verse did, I don't know if they were the first to do it, and we did it a lot on Turtles as well, is you make sure the character moves almost like a doll. So if I have like my character, so the camera moves and the character moves on ones. But the pose of the character, so let's say he's like this with his hands, and then he goes up, the pose only changes on twos. So the character is still moving, but this is still on twos, sort of. That's kind of one of the solutions. And you can see it on Dragon Prince as well. So like, that was something that we did a lot of experimenting on as well. So yeah, there's different like challenges that are technical, I guess, but they are visual eventually, right? But it's just like, how do you do that in CG? So that was a challenge, but yeah.
The villains, you said Superfly was tricky. Was there anything else in that group? Because that whole group is very asymmetrical and like.
Oh, for sure.
Like Rocksteady's head is enormous. Like
I remember. Yeah, there's stuff like that. They had a lot of accessories, like Bebop's nipple rings, I remember, were an interesting conversation.
Oh, because I guess they have to move, right? They have to
move, but yeah. And then his hair, Rocksteady for sure, like his huge head and his horn. Like, for example, like whenever there's a character with like anything big in front of their face, whether it's a nose or a horn, is like, how do you make sure he sees? Because it's like, if I put his face like this, you're not going to see his eyes. He's almost like a fish. Like, you need to always, like, put him to the side, right? Sure. Like, different things like that. Or even just, like, body mechanics-wise. Like, their proportions were very extreme, right? Like, I think, if I recall, like, Bebop's legs were just tiny.
Yep.
So, you know, that was a challenge. But it also opens up, like, a lot of, you know, usually they say, like, limitation is where creativity is, right? Like, where it resides. So I remember we had that scene where Superfly was like fighting Bebop, and he stuck his claw in Bebop's like nose ring and like pulled him, you know, stuff like that. So, you know, if the character doesn't have a nose ring, you can't do that, right? So different things like that, which is cool.
Do you have to remember to move Bebop's nipple rings every frame? Like, do you have to like? There's nothing that'll do that. Like, it doesn't.
There is a department called CFX, so they do like cloth, hair, accessories, and stuff. But you kind of decide which parts you want to be automated and which ones you don't. And even when it's automated, it's still a human like deciding how it moves. It's just they use parameters rather than like going every frame and moving it. So they'll decide like what's the weight, what's the mass, what's the elasticity, what's the flexibility, what's the stiffness, you know, how much, you know, different things. Like, I've never done CFX specifically, but there's different tools that I've used that kind of have those like different settings and stuff, you know, like, because essentially when you're animating in CG, you're using programs that are using math, right? It's basically values over time. And so as long as there's math, you can dictate how much things weigh and how much they're going to move, and air is like all of these things you can simulate, quote unquote. The problem, from my experience at least, with simulating a lot of those things is they tend to not look very good, because the real world doesn't look that good. Like it's not super clear and visual. Like the shapes and the lines that you get from a simulation might look realistic, but they might not look appealing. They might not look beautiful. So when you see a movie and the character's hair is flowing really nicely or their cloth is really moving nicely, like it's not necessarily just because someone put in a few parameters. Like there are artists that put in a lot of time and
Sure,
effort
that
to
makes
make it
sense.
look
Yeah.
that way, right? And especially when you go to more stylized films, Spider-Verse, Turtles, even Dragon Prince, like it's very hard because if you simulate things, they don't always look right. So the nipple ring specifically, in my opinion, not that hard to animate on your own. Also not that hard to simulate. Um,
But this is like,
oh,
does his belly have to jiggle too and things like that?
yeah, we had belly controls that we had
Oh,
to
shit.
jiggle. Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
pretty
fast.
much
Like,
any
there's so much talking about Bebop's nipple rings. This is great.
nipple ring. Yeah, yeah, everything that you see, someone has to move. It's pretty
Sure.
wild. I remember April's hair was a big one that we talked
Hmm.
about. The turtles have bandanas, right? And so they built these amazing rigs. Our rigging department, or Mikros' rigging department, I'm not sure, where like the bandanas have these really nice weighted poses to them, so that like they actually look like they're sitting on their shoulders or on their shells, so you don't have to constantly, because again, the computer doesn't know that there's two objects. They can go through each other in the computer very easily.
Hmm.
So they built some sort of rig to make it to add a lot of that sort of simulation. So we have a really good starting point. But there's still a lot of, painstaking, work that has to go into it. But yeah, every accessory that you see for sure. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
You had said one
Yeah.
sequence that your studio worked on was the part where the all the bad guys
Hmm.
Superfly turn against him and they
Yeah.
along with the turtles fight Superfly. Uh
Yeah.
can you talk about putting that scene together, especially with so many characters?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the first step with that scene that we had to do a lot of was just continuity and cinematography of just like planning how this incredible like scene is going to go out, right? Because when an animator gets a shot, they get their shot and that's it, right? Or if they get a run of shots, but you have to plan it in a way where it's like almost like if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and there's like a map and you're looking at from a top-down view and where is everyone going to be and where is this going to happen? And if he gets thrown here, well, we have to make sure that in this scene he's over there. So there was a lot of work on just the setup of like where is everyone going to be? When are they going to do everything? We got to make sure that if they got thrown over here in the next scene, you see them there or like different things like that. So that was definitely a big process. And there's a different department that does a lot of that called the layout department. So they work a lot together with us in animation, as well as set dressing, making sure the props are correct and we have everything. Um, uh, what was kind of the next step? The next step was like, yeah, like populating the scenes with a lot of characters is really time consuming. So sometimes, I don't remember we did this a lot on this film, we get extra animators to work on more than one animator per scene. So you might have an animator who does, they call it like the hero of the shot, whether it's one, three, five people, and then the 12 in the back are done by someone else.
Hmm.
And then another time leads, which is something I did on that sequence, will create animations for characters who are in the background and they're not necessarily being super active. Like maybe they're listening, maybe they're just breathing, maybe they're anticipating something that's about to happen or reacting. So you can kind of create these like base animations of characters. We call them like cycles. So people can just kind of like plug and play, just use an animation and use that as a starting point and then add on top whatever they did. So I did a bunch of animations for a lot of the mutants, making sure that like they feel like who they are. So for example, with Rocksteady, it was like making him like snort and like kind of like move his head in a certain way to make him feel a bit more Rhino like. And then like with Bebop, he's very into music, so making him like maybe bop his head. And also how do they breathe, right? Like every character's built differently. Maybe their athletic ability is different, so do they breathe more quickly, more slowly, stuff like that. So that was a big part as well. Um, and then a lot of the work just ends up, when the animator starts. So I remember one shot specifically was really cool. I really liked that. It was animated by Daniel Harvey. He was on my team. And it was the part where, what was the crocodile's name? I forgot.
Leatherhead.
Leatherhead was fighting Superfly, and they had, so before like animators start, we usually have sort of like a preliminary block out of what's going on. You'll often call it like layout or previs or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it was in the beginning, but it just wasn't really high energy. It wasn't like super powerful. It like felt like it was missing something. And so we decided, I think Daniel came up with the idea, whoa, it would be really cool if the alligator sort of like dived under and went under the wires. I don't know if you remember, it's like one shot in this sequence, and then jumped out and attacked, kind of like an alligator, right? Like
Sure.
at Superfly, and Superfly just caught him. So then it was like, okay, well, we don't have the system built so these pipes could move. Like there wasn't a rig, there wasn't controls for this environment to move in that way. Normally, when you're modeling an environment like industrial pipes, you're not like, oh, the animator is going to need to move them. I'm going to put controls on it.
Sure.
That takes time, which costs money, right? So it kind of becomes this like, okay, well, maybe we could pitch it to the director, see if he likes it. If he does, we got to ask rigging to help us build the system to do it. And we got it. We got it approved, which was really, really cool. I think Daniel did some preliminary work on it as well.
Oh, cool.
But there were tons of pipes that he ended up having to animate, basically. You know, as you asked with the nipple ring, like, yeah, those pipes don't move because an alligator is pushed into them, right?
Yeah.
They are not moving. So, a lot of different things like that definitely came up. With Superfly, I think it was just really hard because he has so many different parts to him, right? Like one arm is a regular arm, one arm is a claw. Then he has these two little arms on his, on his belly. So there was a lot of like
Dude, he got
discussion.
4 wings. He's got a
He's
lot.
got wings. Yeah. So there's a lot of discussion around that, right? Because yeah, you do. I mean, we didn't. I'm sure Mikros did it. Like, do a lot of testing in pre-production where you're developing the characters and different things like that. But a mentor of mine once said, you really don't know your character until you start animating them in shots, right? Because things come up, right? They suddenly have to do something that you didn't think they would, or you suddenly have an idea of something that would work better. So a lot of that, for sure.
There's such a size difference between some of those characters, like Bebop, Rocksteady, and Superfly are huge, and then Mondo and Genghis are tiny. Is one easier, is smaller or bigger easier than the other, or no?
I feel like generally from my experience, CG, it's a lot easier if you have just like a generically lanky character, because the heavier they are, the more limited the range of motion is.
Okay.
Sort of the shape language. But I think the complexity comes from like the design. Like, for example, like Leatherhead is an alligator, but he also walks on two, and he also has a hat, or she also has a hat. Mondo, I think, has a skateboard attached to his tail or something, if I recall.
He's a roller skate on his tail plus the skateboard. Sure.
Yeah, so like that definitely, adds to the complexity, like different things like that. Superfly is a great example of that. Splinter is an interesting one just because of his height. So, part of it is the context of like, who are they interacting with, right? So if you have a character that's really small and a character that's really big, there's certain things that the character that's smaller can't do, right? Like he can't punch him in the face, for example. Like he can't reach his face. Yeah. So stuff like that, I guess. But yeah, every rig, every character has its quirks and challenges. There is no, easy way, I would say. But I think if you have a generically looking human kind of character that's like fairly not extremely proportioned different, like the design, it tends to be, simpler. But it's rarely like that in like cartoony or CG films. Like characters' heads are way too big, their shoulders are way too small, their arms are way too long. It's just like so. But again, limitation is kind of a necessity in my opinion. Like otherwise, you'd kind of like, what do I do? I can do anything. But yeah, that sequence was definitely a big one. And then it also had a lot of dialogue as well eventually, so it was like a bit of everything. And there was obviously like a big change, emotionally with the mutants and the turtles and trying to convince them. So there was definitely a lot of discussion around that as well. That has its own set of challenges in terms of performance and different things like that. Yeah.
speaking of like the dialogue and the performance, like shifting our attention to the turtles, like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the one of the most novel things about the movie was casting those four kids as the turtles, and like
100%.
the movie has this energy to it that
Yeah.
is totally unique. I'm guessing, does that inform what you like? Is there anything about those voices, those four kids, that like informs what you do?
Yeah,
Other
I
than
mean, I didn't even know it at the beginning that A, it was done that way, and B, that it was that unique until I was told, is those four kids recorded so much of their stuff together in the same room,
yeah, which is super rare
right?
now. Yeah,
Which is apparently very rare. I didn't realize, and it's true that a lot of the times, because we get footage of the actors recording sometimes their voices for the characters, so we can use it as sort of reference.
hmm.
And I didn't realize that, yeah, most of the time when I saw that, it was a person by themselves. So I think there was this back and forth energy between them that was just like you just heard the voice, and there was just so much personality. And I think it informed a lot of us, especially the animators. I didn't animate as much as regular animators. Um, you just come up with so many unique ideas, and then Jeff would just be like, "No, Michelangelo would never do that." And then he would say, "Let's try this." And then he's like, "Yes, Michelangelo would definitely do that." Right? Like it's like I don't know how to explain it. I think there's a lot of gut feeling to it of just like this character's voice exudes so much and gives you so information. There are voice actors that you don't have that, like just in general. So, as much as I think the idea of having these four kids record together was substantial, I think they are also great actors, like singularly, each
Totally.
of them, like
Sure.
personality wise, like it's not easy, to do that job for sure. So I think when you have a great voice and you have a voice actor that you can tell that they're giving their all into this and they really resonate with their characters and they react to the other characters in a way that's sincere and genuine, it's just a gold mine, right? Like you really have so much in there because we are animating to their dialogue, right? It's not the other way around. So we are sort of like kind of given something to work with. It's not all on us, right? In that sense. And obviously we can add a lot and exaggerate things and whatever. But yeah, the voice acting performance is really important for sure. And I just felt like Jeff and Kyler, like they just knew these characters so well. Like, it was sometimes hard to get to, but they would react immediately, like just
Hmm.
instinctually, like, yes, no, let's try this, right? It's just, I don't know. It was really great working with them. They were very decisive in that sense,
Did you
which
have
is
videos of the kids to animate too, or not in this
I
case?
didn't, unfortunately. Yeah,
What do
I
you get?
should
Do
have
you get the
asked.
audio and you get boards?
Yeah, audio boards and layout, like some sort of three-dimensional,
Interesting.
rendering of it. Like
Sure.
it's very simplistic movement of characters and cameras and the placement, just the general choreography of what's happening with very rudimentary looking characters, stuff like that.
Do
So
you
it's kind
remember
of a
anything
combination.
specific that they said no to? Like,
Hmm. I don't know. They were very open to our ideas, which was amazing, like because then everyone that works on it feels like they can give, you know, themselves to it as well. Uh I don't remember. I'm trying to remember if
that's
there was
fine.
anything. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
said
no, it
you
was
also
like
did the scene with Splinter and the baby turtles, right?
no, no, Splinter and I wish Splinter saving the turtles. Yeah.
Oh, when they're trapped in the milking room.
In the milking, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're talking about, the Jackie Chan thing. So like just the Splinter beating up all those guys,
So
right?
I animated that shot, but like me and the other leads, we did all of that sequence with a lot of teams of animators. So like
Cool.
that was like a sequence that was done at Cinesite. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Was that I mean, was any of that informed by Jackie Chan stuff?
100%. For my shot specifically, like I used about 11 different video references, and I think probably five of them were Jackie Chan.
Oh
Like
wow.
a
Sure.
lot of Jackie Chan. And I also just watched, I always have, but I watched a lot of Jackie Chan and a lot of his films. So, and I think we did, all of us, like definitely did that as much as we could. Um, and I think also the way that a lot of the scenes were boarded were kind of like referencing a lot of his films anyway. Like not in the sense of like as specific as that, but just using the environment, using props, using the characters against each other, very like Jackie Chan-esque type fighting. So yeah, that definitely was a big part of it for sure.
Other specifics that come to mind, like that like anything he does in that fight that like that's super Jackie Chanish. I don't know like his movies super well. I remember thinking
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, as I said, with my shot specifically, like some of the references were like so specific. So it was like Police Story 2, and I can't remember what was the one in the famous mall scene. I don't know if that's Police Story as well, because he has like four of them. He had that movie with Jet Li.
okay.
I forgot that one, so I did that as well. So there was some of that. And then there were also others like Sammy Wong, I forgot his name. I forgot his last name, but there were other martial artists that were like connected to Jackie Chan or like were even before him that I also looked at a lot. But yeah, definitely like I can pull it up if you're curious, like a lot of different Jackie Chan references.
I mean, like, what, like, how, I guess my question is like, what does Splinter do in the scene that like, oh, this is direct, or this was, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes
Oh,
sense.
like it's literally like his fighting moves. So like the way he will block an attack and take down an enemy, the
Oh,
way he
cool.
dodges things, the general choreography, the type of kick that he does. Like it is very close. Like I could show you, like it is very, you know, you can't do one to one because obviously Splinter doesn't look like Jackie
Of
Chan,
course,
but
yeah. And you know, like,
so
well, I'm curious, like, also too, how
yeah.
do you like Splinter is this very strangely shaped
Yeah.
character, very short. He has this
Yeah.
enormous head. He has these weird like eyebrow antler things,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's such an but like how do you I don't know was there a challenge to kind of take these human motions and like put him in this
Yeah.
very bizarre kind of puzzle of a character?
100%. Yeah, the biggest thing that, as I mentioned earlier, that it's kind of obvious, but then suddenly when you're tasked with making him fight, you realize, oh, he can't punch the guards at all. And not only can he not punch them, he also can't really kick them anywhere kind of above their groin, really, unless he like jumps. So the biggest challenge was the choreography of like, I guess Splinter's fighting style is neutralize and escape, right? Because he doesn't have the option to do a lot of hits, and he doesn't
Huh.
have the option to like block a lot of things as well, again just because of his height. So it was coming up with like moves that he could do where he's either using the guards against each other by
Okay.
dodging, or he does one thing and knocks them out essentially, right? Because he can't do anything that's like there's not going to be this, like Jackie Chan does a lot of these, but there's not going to be that Splinter. It just can't, right?
Does he hit a lot of
um
groins in that fight scene?
Not in mine. I don't know if
Okay,
he
I
hits a
wasn't.
lot of
I don't
groins, but
remember that, but
yeah, yeah.
I'm
But
wondering now.
but he like jumps around a lot and rolls, and as I said, like uses props against the enemies,
There's
just
a
in
certain
general
and
in
I
the
don't know
whole
if this is a
movie.
reference or not, and
Yeah.
forgive me if it's not, but like that Yoda fight scene in Attack of the Clones.
Oh, I don't remember.
That's okay. There's like a Star Wars, but the first time
Yeah,
Yoda fought anybody, because
yeah. He like jumps on them, right?
yeah, he kind of does a lot of like hopping around and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
There's a little bit of like this much smaller character having to pass these
yeah,
way taller.
yeah. Yeah, I think he wasn't my teacher, but I think he was one of the founders of Animation Metro. I think he worked on that. I remember
Oh,
reading a
cool.
blog post about it, but yeah, I didn't look at any of that for reference, but I mean, that's definitely an interesting comparison. And I feel very, very, very applicable, like a smaller character against like a lot larger ones. And Jeff also had like very, some specific requests for different shots of like the feeling that he wanted to get and different stuff like that. So, it was a lot of different stuff like that, but it was as much as we can like Jackie Chan, as much as we can make it feel like it's Jackie Chan, so
It was such an inspired choice to do Splinter. It really just
yeah.
very exciting when they announced that. There's
Yeah.
a third scene that I wanted to highlight, if you don't mind. So we talked
Yeah.
about like those two big fight scenes with a lot of people running around and bumping into each other.
Hmm.
But like you also guys did the pizza party Splinter throws for the turtles. Like what? That's an emotional scene, and it's much
Hmm.
smaller. So like what?
Yeah.
What are the challenges there?
I think the challenges there are like the characters, you kind of want to feel that progression, right? Because there's a lot of back and forth between the same characters in this one space. So you really want to make sure to feel, because as I said, like as animators, we're often like just looking at our 1, 2, 3 shots, but you really want to make sure to look at the whole sequence and make it feel like there's that progression, that the characters are like, it makes sense, right? So for that sequence, I split that with another lead. So we were 2 different teams on that sequence. And so, like there's a pretty big change with Splinter, of course, like where in the beginning he's very like happy-go-lucky, super excited to like throw them this thing, and he's really hoping that they're gonna, get it. And then the turtles sort of like have to like awkwardly explain that, this isn't really, why we're here and what we want and all this kind of stuff. Like it was very like there's a lot of humor, but obviously like the depth of the emotional aspect of it was pretty big. So and also like trying to highlight the differences between the characters, because it is such an intimate moment of like Leo being like the teacher's pet sort of like leader kind of thing, and everyone else being, a little bit more like, no, we don't want to be like that, and Raph with his temper and so on and so forth. So, that was definitely a challenge. April was a challenge to animate, I thought, like because of, again, Leo's relationship with her, and that sort of like skepticism. Like you always want to keep that sort of feeling of like, do they trust her? Do they not? Does she trust them? Right? Like the whole, kind of aspect of that. So yeah, I feel like a lot of the challenges with those types of scenes are like, just don't do too much. Just let the characters breathe, let them speak for themselves by just being, instead of trying to like overly gesture and act, right? Like they should be just like normal, sincere, genuine interactions. And it sounds simple, but it like really isn't. Because sometimes you're like, oh, that shoulder movement just like really feels too much. Like we really don't need this much shoulder movement, or like the head is just shaking so much. Like we really don't need it. Can the character just be still and just talk? Right.
Is that something that's like sometimes can be tricky for animators, is not to animate or
Yes.
over animate?
Yes, 100%. And it happens to everyone, all of us, like, because
Sure.
that's how we're taught in the beginning, like the technical aspect of just animating, making sure that it feels like characters are alive and affected by gravity takes so much work. So we're used to starting out with moving the character as much as we can all the time. And then suddenly you're like, wait, you need to tell a story. Like, why are you moving so much? So like I find that, especially with my students, like I'm always like, why did you move this? Why did you move the arm? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, exactly. Right. So it's like really asking yourself. And I really like that Jeff and Kyler were all about that very naturalistic acting, very like sincere, very genuine. Like, even though they are very stylized characters, they behave in a way that is relatable.
Mm.
And I think you combine that with the voice acting, and it's just like an amazing combination. Um, yeah, and then there were technical challenges as well. Even though they're standing and talking, I remember dealing with balloon cycles, because we had balloons in the backgrounds that we
Well,
have to
they
make
kind
sure
of
that they
float,
move.
right?
Yeah, they kind of float. That was animation, for example, right? Or like, where are the pizzas located on the table? And wait, the box was open a few scenes ago, but was it open in this one? We have to make sure it's open in both, otherwise it looks like the pizza's clothing. My funniest story with like that kind of stuff is the Chris's. So you remember the 3
Yeah, the
cardboard
cardboard
cutouts of
cutout.
Chris's, right? So often when we're animating, we don't see the final look of the film when we're animating. It's a very like rudimentary version of the texture. So we'll see like the basic colors, and obviously the shapes are all correct, but like the colors are not, right. There's no lighting, there's no rendering. It's
So it's all
very
super. It's all bright, right?
not necessarily bright. I'd say it's actually very like, can sometimes be very gray.
Oh, interesting.
um,
Okay.
yeah, but generally, like you'll have the textures, but they are, a lot more simple. So their skin is not like a bunch of different colors. It is just like green, and their bandana is red. There's not like variation and texture and like material, right? It is very
Okay.
like flat. Um, and so what happens sometimes with assets is like, sometimes you might be working with something. Let's say you've got a character using a hammer, and texturing just hasn't been done yet, but you can work on the hammer. Like you can animate the character holding the hammer and slamming something, and the hammer's just completely gray, right? And that's fine. But suddenly we were tasked with having 3 cardboard cutouts of Chris's. And so you have 3 gray shapes in your scene. How do you know where to place them? Right?
Hmm.
So normally you're like, that's a hammer, that's a lamp, that's a pizza, but they're all called Chris. So then someone decided this is Chris A, this is Chris B, Chris C. And we were like, okay, but which one is which? Because also some of them have the same last name. Not that the ABC was related to it. So suddenly we were like, hold on, we need to find the texture that's connected to the cutouts to be able to make sure we understand where to place them. Because animation, I mean, layout places them, but animation has to animate them and make sure to move them if need be. And so there was a lot of like, not a lot, but like there was some confusion and time wasted on sort of like, wait, we've got 3 gray boxes and they're all named Chris. Which one is which Chris? And where do I place them?
So there was like a weightlessness to them almost, right? Because they're such, because they like fall over, they're cardboard, right? So they can't be like, they must react differently or something, right?
Yeah, of course, for sure. Yeah, you got to animate it to feel like it's cardboard. Yeah. I think he picks them up and moves them around, so there was that shot. And then in the end, one of them falls, if I recall. The end of the sequence. Yeah. So yeah, there's always challenges. Like there's always weird things to problem solve and sort of figure out. It's never ending really. But it's part of the fun.
Is there other challenges from that movie that still stand out to you, or like anything else that you wanted that comes to mind?
The challenge, I think is, changes. Like films change as you're working on them, and there's rewrites and dialogue changes and stuff like that. My Splinter shot that I did was actually a pretty big one because when I arrived to work on the project, that scene was almost kind of done. Like that shot, like there was that fight scene that I did was already completed. And then after, I don't know, a couple of weeks, the directors decided they don't like it and they want a new one. And it was kind of like stressful because it's like, A, who's going to do it? B, do we have enough time? And they were like, well, maybe Neave should do it. And at that point, I hadn't really animated that much on the film, and I really wanted to, but it was a really scary task.
Sure.
And they didn't have time to redo the layouts or like the 3-dimensional pre-visualization of it. They just kind of had storyboards. And they said, we want the fight redone with these storyboards in mind. And there's 2 things that we want in the fight. One is the actions have to overlap each other. We don't want it to feel like Splinter's waiting for something to happen. Like he should be getting attacked by one person and immediately getting attacked by another.
Sure.
And the second is they really wanted the guard to hit the other one by accident, like for Splinter to sort of like dodge.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was tasked with that, and it was terrifying. And I basically had to, choreograph it all on my own. I also did a lot of the camera work. I had to do the 2D like effects lines of like all the electricity and the hits. There's like these like sort of spark hits sort of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And different things like that. Yeah. So that's hand drawn basically on top. They are actually meshes in the scene. They are actually 3-dimensional meshes, but they are drawn. And so that was for me like my big like sort of personal challenge. And then you're still leading a team while you're doing it, like you're leading a team, having meetings with production. And I was just very fortunate to have like a super supportive supervisor, and the other leads and the production team were just like incredible. So I was able to spend some time to focus on that scene. And yeah, I feel like I got really lucky. Like Jeff and Tyler like really trusted me with it, and they were very happy with it. But it was probably the most challenging thing I have ever animated at that time. Even though it's like only 11 seconds long, I think there's like, I don't know, 12 characters or something.
See what was wrong with the previous version of it.
It was kind of like what they wanted. Like they just felt like the action didn't overlap each other enough. Just the general choreography, right? So they had to like go back to the drawing board a little bit and do that. But there was, because again, it was so rushed, like there was a lot of work to do with the choreography, because again, when you have these 2-dimensional drawings, like these 2D drawings, like they don't relate to the characters' proportions and sizes and everything. So I couldn't really use too much of it. It was very much like I have to find and plan this thing out, right? And I'm not a martial arts person, so it's not like I have all this knowledge of it, but it just spent a lot of time looking at a lot of fighting movies and trying to combine things together, sort of like Frankenstein, different actions from different films.
And then just music like in that scene too, right? There's or is it just a score?
I don't recall what the music was.
Maybe
I don't usually have the music when I'm working on it.
Like set to a song. But maybe that one's just scored.
Oh, I don't remember. I could check, but I don't remember.
I wasn't sure if that had to if you had to animate to the music.
No, I don't remember having to animate to the music for that at all. That would be interesting. Yeah, so that was a pretty big challenge.
I talked to the guy who animated the No Diggity sequence where the turtles are breaking.
Oh wow, who was that?
Oh,
do you remember his name?
I interviewed a bunch of people from the movie all around when it came out, and I'm trying to.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah,
that was an amazing sequence.
That's so good. It's
yeah,
I'm feeling really bad because I'm not remembering the moment. But he was talking about having to he knew that was the song, and it was a tricky to kind of. What the fuck?
That's cool. Yeah, I've never done anything like that where they're like, "This is the song you've got to animate." It's like a Baby Driver thing.
Yeah, it was it very much informed the beats of the sequence, but I guess with yours is the other way around. You had.
Yeah, I didn't have any sound that I had to follow. Luckily, that would have made it even more scary. Yeah.
Oh wait, I found that thing. Hold on. It is.
No worries.
John Jackson.
John Jackson. Don't know him, but
he boarded it. I'm sorry, he boarded it.
Oh, he boarded it. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. He boarded it. And it's interesting to see the boards and then the animation on top of that because they were super close. But there was all because they knew it was to the song. The song was in the script.
Ah, okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm thank you for taking me through the animation class part of this. I love this.
No worries. I'm Googling John Jackson.
I end every episode by asking people what's their favorite turtle. So I'm guessing I'm asking what's your favorite turtle and why, but also if there's any sort of unique animation things as opposed to the other turtles. If that makes sense.
Oh wow, it's really, really hard. I don't know why. I really liked Raph in this movie. I'm just going based off of this movie.
Sure, yeah.
I don't consider myself an angry person, so hopefully people don't take it that way. But I don't know. I really liked his energy. I like his size. I like his fighting style. He's a bit more of a brute, sort of the strong guy. And I think a lot of it comes from just the animation that I've seen, working together with the animators and seeing what they did. And there were just a bunch of moments where I saw Raph just acting in a way that just was so Raph. I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. So he was definitely a big one. In terms of animation, actually, ironically, I feel like a lot of people liked forgot his name, the purple one. Donatello, yeah, because of his what was it, the glasses and the headphones and all that sort of stuff. People really gravitated towards him. I think that was his accessories, right? If I recall.
Oh yeah, the whole Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of as I said, the animation, you have to animate that, right? So it's
sure.
there was more to do.
He had the fanny pack and the phone and all that other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, right, the phone, yeah, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I spent most of my time with Splinter fighting, so I think I kind of fell in love with him. But yeah, Raph was definitely one that stood out to me, just in terms of how he was in the movie. But yeah, hard to pick.
I'm all set here. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really great talking to you.
You too. Thanks.
Relax and breathe. Keep training. You'll get it. Ich, ni, song, shi. Come on, everybody, train karate.
Ich, ni, song, shi. Come on, everybody, train karate. Karate, train my body all the time. Karate.
I don't mean to brag, I don't mean to boast, but I've trained karate from coast to coast.
Karate. Train your body.
I've done the kung fu, the show and rue. I even did a little jujitsu. Karate. Train your body.
Well, I've trained karate around the world. I'm known all over as Karate Girl. I'm witty, I'm pretty, got the female smarts. So listen to our rap about the martial arts. Karate. Train your body.
Karate.
Train your body.
I train in my car. I'm a ninja. Karate. Train your body. karate. Train your body. Come on, everybody, train.